When we talk about modern defending, two of the names that dominate this conversation with absolutely no difficulty is Virgil van Dijk and Sergio Ramos. On one side, you have the calm and towering presence of Virgil van Dijk, a player who refined Liverpool's backline with near-perfect positioning, and on the other, you have the furious, battle-hardened veteran Sergio Ramos, a captain who built his entire career on leadership, aggression, and clutch performances on the biggest stage. So today's question is, which one of these two players were more dominant and more impressive during their primes? And who should rank higher as a legend all time? Well, just like with most of our debates on this channel, the answer to that question is certainly unexpected as well. The very first question that we need to answer before going any further is which seasons for these two legendary players were actually their primes. A question that's extremely easy to answer when talking about Virgil van Dijk time at the top, but not so much for Sergio Ramos and his time at Real Madrid. The 2018-2019 season is what's often used when talking about Virgil van Dijk's best performance that he had on record, a fact that is supported through all of the accolades and highlighted moments that he had in that one season alone. For instance, his Ballon d'Or placing in that year and the numerous amount of awards he got for being the very best defender throughout that season. Sergio Ramos, on the other hand, had a few seasons under his belt that people would often say is his actual prime, such as the 2019-2020 season, where he had a record amount of goals in that one season alone, or the 2016-2017 season, where he was named the Defender of the Year in the UCL and won the domestic double along with the Champions League. However, the season we will be using in this video is the 2013-2014 season he had at Real Madrid, a year where he had probably one of the biggest individual impacts on his team, along with a bunch of accolades to his name to boot. So this is the version we will be using in this video. Now, if we go into the most important section of this video, which is the eye test and all of the subcategories that it comes with, I honestly went into this thinking prime for prime, Ramos doesn't really stand a chance the VVD in 2019, thinking back to what I remember seeing from Liverpool and Van Dijk during that season. After all, Van Dijk was literally so good throughout that year, people actually thought Messi stole the Ballon d'Or from him in 2019. And that was a year when Messi had over 70 goal contributions to his name. That's how insanely good Virgil van Dijk really was throughout that season. However, when looking back at all of Sergio Ramos' feats, achievements, and numbers back in 2014, the answer to this question is honestly not so clear. For instance, when it comes down to their shooting abilities, Virgil van Dijk and Sergio Ramos are among some of the best in their position historically in terms of their abilities in front of goal. Going by what we can see, Virgil van Dijk does have an edge from a corner, seeing that he does have a much higher leap in the air, and also going by the fact that he's a full 5 inches taller. His abilities from set pieces are really good for his position, and in the unusual event that he does get a shot, he would be hitting the target more often than not. However, Sergio Ramos, on the other hand, does have an advantage all around, being what's considered a penalty kick expert, more than efficient in the air, acrobatic when he needs to, and is also a guy that would take free kicks on a Madrid team with all of their free kick experts and specialists. And this doesn't seem to be just a visual thing either. If we are going with the numbers, Sergio Ramos does have the edge in the Champions League, and from most of the information that's available, have similar numbers in domestic competitions as well, with Sergio needing less shots per game to score the same amount of goals on average. So when it comes down to their shooting abilities in their primes, this is certainly in the Madrid's icons' favor. Now, when it comes down to their top speed, from what I was able to find, Sergio's top speed throughout his entire career was about 32 kilometers per hour at his highest, but within the 2013-2014 season specifically, his fastest speed was 30 kilometers per hour within the Champions League. However, when compared to Virgil, Ramos' top speed isn't really anything impressive at all. The highest time that's ever been recorded for Virgil is about 34.9 kilometers per hour in the 2023-2024 season, according to the Premier League website. But within the 2018-2019 season, his top speed was about 34.5 kilometers per hour at his highest, a time that was recorded against Barcelona in the semi-finals of the UCL, which made him the fastest player for Liverpool in that tournament that season. Dribbling is another section that's probably not as important for a defender, but is a great indicator of how good someone is under pressure, and is a great measure of someone's confidence on the ball. Historically, during Van Dijk's time at Liverpool, he didn't really try to dribble as much as his other counterparts in the Premier League, which is probably a result of Liverpool's offensive and defensive tactics over the years. But when he does attempt to dribble, he usually has a high success rate, which suggests good decision making and a good understanding of the game, instead of lack of an ability. When he does try to dribble, he doesn't seem to have a desire to be flashy, and because of his huge frame, he usually keeps it simple, choosing effectiveness and accuracy over anything else. This is in stark contrast with Sergio Ramos and his time at Real Madrid, which is mainly because of his history at the club playing as a right back. As weird as it actually looks to see a no-nonsense player like him try to dribble, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that he's actually better at dribbling than some of the best attacking players in the modern game, which explains why he never really had any issues when under pressure from the opposition, or when he's trying to play out from the back, or when going forward. And although these numbers isn't anything really special, it somewhat confirms what we can see with our eyes, with Sergio Ramos in the 2013-2014 season being more involved in each game within the Champions League and having a slightly higher dribbling success rate per game, a fact that is also backed up by their average amount of progressive carries that they had throughout that same period as well. Another one of these categories that's really interesting that most of you guys were probably waiting for is their passing abilities. And surprisingly enough, Sergio Ramos is actually the one that will be walking away with the points here. Virgil van Dijk is well known for his ability to distribute to his teammates from the back, passing with super high accuracy with both feet to either side of the pitch, having a really cool passing aesthetic when attempting to find his teammates on the wing. And while the same can be said about Sergio Ramos and his passing abilities, as his aesthetic and technique was essentially the same, it's their passing accuracy, however, that completely paints a different picture. Not only is Sergio's passing accuracy better per game on average within the Champions League, he also has some really big advantage when it comes down to the amount of passes that's made per game, and also because of how accurate he is within each category, especially when passing in the opponent's half. And if you think this doesn't really prove much, because these players could be making more conservative passes to prevent making mistakes on average, upon further investigation, I highly doubt this was the case at all. Now, I can't say for certainty, seeing that football statistics wasn't being heavily documented in the 2013-2014 season, but from the 4 Champions League Sergio Ramos played from 2018 to 2022, which isn't fully even his prime, he was more or less averaging the same amount of progressive passes within the Champions League per game, taking the same amount of risk as Virgil van Dijk in his best season in his career. Meaning, odds are, Sergio Ramos is probably a more reliable passer when all is considered. Now finally, for sure the most important factors when talking about a defender is their defending capabilities and their physicality as a player. And for this, we will be getting extremely specific. If we go with the 4 subcategories that EA uses when grading these players based on their physicality, Virgil van Dijk is the one who's walking away with the advantage here. Although Sergio Ramos does have the advantage when it comes to aggression, being more assertive and forceful in a tackle, to a point where one can actually say it's a negative, as within these 2 seasons alone, Ramos had double the amount of yellows VVD had within the same period. However, even if we put all of those facts to the side, this is pretty much where all of his advantage ends. While we can't say for sure who has more stamina within these 2 seasons, in regards to their jumping abilities and strength, this is very much in Van Dijk's favor, and it's not really hard to see why. VVD is well known for his physicality as a player, often looking like a brick wall because of how tall he is and how he uses his body to shield players from the ball. And along with his gigantic frame makes him really dominant in the air as well, going by the fact that he has a personal best of 3 meters high, which is much higher than Sergio Ramos' best, which is 2.5 meters high, and is also higher than that viral Ronaldo jump that was going around the internet a few years ago. And by that account, it shouldn't be surprising that Virgil is just more dominant in the air, winning almost 65% of his aerial duels compared to Sergio Ramos' 60% in their best season respectively. This real advantage is also pretty clear if we are talking about their defensive acumen as well. When it comes to their aerial play, marking, defensive awareness, and composure, it is just really hard to make an argument here for Sergio Ramos. And the truth is, it's not even because he's really bad at these things, he is not. It's just VVD is a monster when it comes down to these attributes. He is literally one of those defenders that could be in a 2v1 situation and would still be calm, confident, and focused when dealing with the situation. And it is a skill that made a lot of people take interest in the art of defending in 2019, at a time when people actually thought it was only attacking players that could win any individual awards. And while there is really no numbers that could accurately quantify such an ability, if there was any, I would almost guarantee it would be in VVD's favor. This just leaves us with tackling and interception, 2 subcategories that would be split between these 2 players. From what we can see when looking at all of these numbers within these 2 seasons, because of Sergio Ramos' more aggressive playing style, he does attempt more tackles per game in contrast to VVD, which in return leads him to have more interceptions per game on average. And because of this, I think Ramos would have the advantage, seeing that he would be the one more likely to make an interception. However, if we are only talking about their tackling abilities, VVD does have the advantage. His timing and his ability to choose when and where to commit a challenge is what makes Virgil van Dijk so special. So although it does seem like he's not tackling as much as Sergio, I would argue that he's just making better decisions on average defensively when facing his problems, which is probably one of the reasons why he went an entire season without being dribbled past even once. So from all of the information that we were able to find for the eye test, I think we can confidently say that Sergio Ramos is the one who's more rounded as a player when compared to VVD, having a clear advantage in pretty much every metric except for in the defense. However, before we walk away and say that this is the definite conclusion to this video, there are some really big questions that needs to be answered in regards to their overall impact on their teams. Questions such as consistency, mental effects on opponents, and what type of effects that their teams had on their performance as a whole. Well, surprisingly enough, this entire section makes Sergio Ramos looks even more impressive than I actually thought. If we start off with their psychological impact, there's a case to be made here for both of these 2 players. While VVD is known for his calm and commanding presence at the back that will get his opponents nervous when trying to get past him, we can make the same argument for Sergio Ramos and his no-nonsense style of defending. So this is definitely a subjective category that could go either way. And in regards to their consistency, VVD does have the advantage, because again, Ramos' disciplinary record within just one season alone is more than what some people have in their entire career. So at least you can depend on VVD on being really good for very long, without missing out on games due to suspension. Now, what really makes Sergio Ramos' impact look way more impressive is when you look at Real Madrid's defensive structure for their team in 2014 and why it makes it harder for him to defend when compared to VVD at Liverpool. Real Madrid's defensive tactics under Carlo Ancelotti in the 2013-2014 campaign was structured around counter-attacking, opting for 4-3-3 when going forward, and in most cases, transitioning to a 4-4-2 in defense, relying on mid-blocks to win back possession over other tactics such as a collective press. Now, this playing style can be really effective if you have the right personnel in the midfield and the defense, and that's because these structures normally force teams to go wide because of the overload in the midfield, leaving your defenders to deal with the opposition's heavy use of the wings. However, for a team like Real Madrid, having an effective defensive structure isn't something that they're really known for. Most of their problems were coming from the insufficient amount of pressing from the midfielders and the attackers, something that made them even more vulnerable in the middle. And along with players not transitioning fast enough from attacking to defending, not to mention your wingbacks are further up the field more often than not, creates a situation that's really hard for your defenders to deal with, which is quite evident by the fact that despite the massive overload within the midfield, almost half of the goals that were conceded within that season came from players within central positions. This is literally the opposite of what happened with Virgil van Dijk and Liverpool, despite the fact that they were using the same structure as well. By using more defensive-minded players, along with more emphasis on pressing from the top, they were pretty much able to force their opponents to play wide and to use crosses to try to score. That way, they could utilize the fact that Virgil van Dijk would use his aerial presence to win back possession almost 90% of the time. And the proof is in the pudding. Most of the goals Liverpool conceded in that season came from the wings. The middle of the park was literally impossible to play through. So it's pretty much undeniable that it was much easier for Van Dijk to be so dominant in his best season defensively, as his team was literally built on the idea of conceding as little as possible, with Real Madrid more so thinking about outscoring the opposition more than anything else. So what's the overall conclusion here? Well, although this was a really long video, and I had to skip a few factors that I would normally include in this format, I think we can confidently say that overall, Sergio Ramos does have the edge when all is considered. He was better statistically, having more goals and assists. He had a more balanced game based on the eye test, having better numbers pretty much everywhere else except for defense. And when looking at their overall impact on their teams, VVD's impact was extremely impressive. However, the fact that Sergio Ramos was able to hold hands with Pepe on a team that really wasn't built on the idea of defending, while also being a really clutch player for his team when they needed him, is really worth talking about. However, regardless of such a fact, the majority of the numbers defensively is in Van Dijk's favor, meaning from a defensive point of view, he might actually be the better player. But enough from me. What do you guys think? Go ahead and comment down below, who do you guys prefer as a player or as a defender? And who would you like to see next on the channel? And as always, thank you for watching.